Hey everybody, Raphael Harry here. You're listening to White Label American. On this show, we dive into unique and diverse origin stories from immigrants and allies. Join us weekly as we break barriers, connect the past with the present, and peek into the future. Welcome to another episode of White Label American. Thank you all for joining us today, newcomers, old-time listeners, and shout out to our newest member on Patreon. I believe Patreon has been having a new upgrade to their system, so I wasn't even aware that I had a new member join. I think she's been with us for about 3 weeks. So feel free to reach out to me if you need, if you have any questions or any concerns. Yeah, reach out. I always like hearing from new members because I don't know this person, brand new person entirely. So it's the first time I've had someone like that join on Patreon because I literally know most everybody who has been supporting on Patreon. So I'm very glad to have someone brand new out of my influence. So yeah, it's very encouraging. So it means I've been doing something correctly, I guess. Yeah, woohoo! So with that being said, let's get to meet today's guest. I am very honored to have. We only have distinguished and the top of the top guests here, but today I'm literally telling you we have somebody who I've been trying to get this guest for some time, and first time I heard her speak, I was like, "Oh wow, now we got to get this person." And she's you got to hear from her. When you hear from her, she's fluent in 5 languages. She's been on TEDx. She has a PhD in biology, executive MBA in digital leadership, captivating speaker, outstanding moderator, multi-award nominated podcast host. Career in the life sciences industry. Hey, there's plenty more, but you'll love her because I love her stuff. I've listened to her podcast. So with that being said, let's get to meet today's guest, Dr. Claire Murigande. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Hi, Raphael. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing great.
Yes, the honor is all mine. And please, can you let the audience know about your podcast before we dive into your origins?
Cool. Thank you. Well, my podcast is called Narratives of Purpose, and I've been running it for almost 4 years now, 3.5 years. So I started in December 2020. So obviously, like everybody knows, it was in the middle of the pandemic. And I guess I was not the first person to start a podcast during the pandemic.
Hey, but many of them didn't survive.
Well, I'm still here. And basically the story behind the idea I had was, coming back to the pandemic and all this bad news running around everywhere, and felt like it's just doom and gloom everywhere. And in my own network, but also people that I was following, I actually saw more positive things happening. I thought, why not create a platform to just share those stories and those individual journeys? Because I also think that, for me, audio is a very powerful medium.
Yes.
Radio, podcasting, don't get me started on that. I don't know how many podcasts I listen to. and radio is like every day, whether I'm driving or even at home, whatever I'm doing, there's always some sound. Music is the same thing. So I thought, instead of writing a blog or doing something different where I would actually tell people stories, because I found what they were doing was really amazing, I thought, okay, let me have them on my show that I will create, actually. So create this platform and let them tell their stories. And basically, I would be amplifying those voices and bringing those, I like to call them impactful stories, because these are stories of, social impact. So people who are taking it upon themselves to change things in society because it's not working for everyone, but then they're working on solutions. So that's basically the whole idea behind the podcast. I've been doing that for, like I said, 3.5 years. It's bi-weekly, and I've had a few breaks in between. So I think now is the 6th season, and I've had 70 episodes. And we've had topics going from health equity to youth empowerment, sustainability, and so on and so forth. And my guests are really from all over the place. I mean, Africa, North America, Europe, Asia, South Asia.
Oh yeah.
I haven't spoken to anyone in Australia and South America, but maybe it'll come soon.
Oh, okay. I might.
Yeah.
Well, I know somebody in Australia. If you need someone there, but yeah, I know you will because I've listened to a couple of episodes, and the diversity is one of the things that impressed me about the podcast, and not just the diversity of the guests, the diversity of topics covered, and diversity of languages spoken on the podcast too.
Yes,
So
yes,
yeah,
yes,
that was the
yes.
first time I listened to a podcast in German, and I was like, oh yeah, I need to be doing this more often. So
So do you speak German, by the way?
we'll find out one day. Well, people got. I think I won't let freeloaders get that access right now. You know, I don't want the CIA to add that to my file.
But
yet.
basically the
Ambition. That's
language,
all I'll tell you.
yeah, but the language is in English, and because in Switzerland where I'm based, we actually have. I was talking to your producer before you joined. We have 4 official national languages,
Yeah.
but I only speak half of them, so French and German.
Hey,
And I thought for one of the
very
series,
good.
because I was talking to people within, the local regions, I thought, why not do the interviews in the language? Because I guess it's always better than
Yeah.
having to do it in English.
Yeah, but that's a good way to reach out to people and to. I think it makes the communicating more authentic, because it makes people open up to you, and people listening also pay more attention when they say, "Oh, okay, this person, you know, there's something I don't know. There's something more genuine, when people see that. Oh, okay, this person made that effort to reach out, and then they say, okay, the people opened up, and okay, I pay more attention now. It's just something that I have my own way of making people open up to me. I don't know, superpower, I guess. Except when it comes to the wallet, we'll figure that out one day. But we're getting there. So, how did you settle on the title of your podcast? How did you pick that name?
That's a good question. So, I mean, like you said before, I have a scientific background. So my rationale, if you will, was to okay, let me go through my Apple Podcast, app and see all the different titles, what is recurring, what is not, and what is, because I had an idea, but I was like, okay, let me type in that idea and see if something already exists. Obviously, many things exist because I wanted to be around people, stories, and I think there was something else, purpose. I think exactly right.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, cool, that's 3 P's, people, purpose, and then the thing is that there's really lots of things that exist. And at some point, I just started saying, okay, let me try and see how I can play around with a few words. And now that I think of it, because I obviously podcasting for a while and being also in different collectives and communities, a friend of mine who is also a podcaster recently refreshed her brand and changed the name, and she was like, oh, and I used AI and all these things. I'm like, oh my gosh, that was just 4 years ago that I started. Even AI was not that powerful enough for me to type in a few things and then it comes up with a name, with even a logo or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, my goodness, that sounds so easy, but then maybe I would have too much choice to choose from. So it was very, I would say, incremental, just looking around what exists, what's there, which made me also discover a few podcasts that I started following. And then I said, okay, no, I don't want to look like this and so on. So I just kind of narrowed it down to narratives because I really wanted the word purpose in there, just to show that, whatever your background, whatever you have done, once you realize, okay, this is where I can make a difference, is basically becoming your purpose somehow, right?
Yes.
So I wanted to have that word. And the narrative somehow, to be honest, I don't recall how it came up, but I was kind of playing around with stories. And someone told me actually 2 years ago, I said, oh, do you know the difference between stories and narratives? I was like, no, what's the difference? He said, well, anybody can tell a story, like you can even make up a story, but your narratives belongs to only you if you tell the story. I'm like, oh, that's great. Actually, it works pretty well with my podcast. I had no idea, right? Like, when you speak about changing the narrative and all the stories that you're told. So now I'm a bit more conscious when I use the word stories and narratives. So that's the backstory of the title.
Okay. Let's go to your origins, to the very beginning. You got two beautiful names, or maybe more than two beautiful names. I know of two. What's the meaning of your names, and is there a story behind how you came to have the names that you do?
Well, so my last name is actually my father's name.
Mm-hmm.
I guess, like, in many places today, that's the name you get, right? Your family name is the father's name. And my first name is actually a French name, or at least from the Francophone name, Claire. And as far as I know, again, this is what I was told. I didn't really look into it, but I was told that when I was born, I had pretty fair skin, and that's why they call me Claire. Claire is like, it's what's actually, I don't even know what's the equivalent in English, you would say, because Claire is also an adjective in French. It's not only a name, a noun, it's also adjective, right?
Okay.
So, which means, yeah, fair or clear or something like that. And that's what I was told like a very, very long time ago. And I just, it settled in my mind, and that's how it is. So I never asked any further. But interesting that you ask is about the names. Is there's this tradition, or at least culturally speaking. So my parents are originally from Rwanda. It's a small country in East Africa, and there's the way the names are given. Basically, like Claire, again, this is my interpretation. Claire is like the Christian name, right?
Yes.
Because like whether it's my parents or my uncles, cousins and so on, everybody has a Christian name. And then the last name, we actually don't have the like family name. That's not in the culture. Everybody has their own name, right?
Okay.
And so if I look at my uncles or my aunts and so on, they don't have the same name as my father. So everybody has their own name, basically.
Oh.
And that's why I say Murigande is my father's name, because he's actually the only one in the family to carry that name. His brothers have different names, because that's the given name, was the name they give you. And then obviously through colonization and everything, and today everybody has, family name. But then something I noticed is like, the new generation, people give them also like a traditional name. And obviously it's kind of like your official second name or middle name. They will say in the US, that's how you call it, middle name. And here's like the second, given name. But I don't have that. I just have a first name and then the last name, which is the family name. And basically it's my father's name.
Oh, fascinating. Wow. I think you might be the first person I've interviewed whose culture has something like that, where it's each person has their own name, and it goes on from there. I'm like, I'm trying to recollect right now. Yeah, I think I've heard that before. So I'm just blown away by that. So, yeah, it's beautiful. It is beautiful. Yeah. So, do you know the meaning of Murigande?
I don't know. I don't even.
It's okay if you don't have it right now, but it's. I love asking, because there's the reason why that became a mainstay question on this podcast is it's fascinating how many cultures you found are intertwined, or how people are related to other people just from that question. I never thought I would get that, and and there's so many things that just come out from asking that question, just like you've shown me right now. I wasn't expecting to hear that. It's literally your father's name. So like, wow.
Yeah,
so.
In the end, it's the family name, right? I mean, it makes sense, like from a European perspective or Western, because it's the family name, and that's how society is structured today. You have a family name, right? Whether you take your father's or your mother's. I don't know. Some people, when they get married, they would then take like the wife's name, I suppose. But
yeah,
that's not very common.
My cousin just
it does happen, but it's not very common. Yeah.
I mean, yeah, but even in Nigeria, there are people who do that. Take the wife's name. I mean, it's an agreement between two people getting married, and it's an agreement.
Exactly, but in the end, it's just one name, right?
Yeah,
not everyone
name.
Keeps their name,
Yeah.
And that's the family name, and that's, I suppose, what the children inherit in the end as well.
Well, yeah, I think all over the world, it's still. I mean, the most popular is to go with Europe, but. I think from every culture that I've seen, it's usually there's usually a family name, and Everybody falls on that, whichever family you got married to, usually the man, and you fall under that branch of the family. Except when you marry into a wealthier woman's family, powerful woman's family, then sometimes the rules change. It's like, okay, we can change the rules.
Okay. Is that what happens in Nigeria?
I've seen things. That's kind of why I'm mischievous sometimes. I'm like, oh, so rules can bend in some cases. And then I've seen people who, it seems like there's genuine respect for each other. And it's like, I don't care. I'll take my wife's name. I'm like, oh. And then I have a cousin but he's English and born and raised. And he just took his wife's name, but she has Brazilian roots. So he's much younger than I am, almost half my age, and he just took his wife's name. And although it's my last name is Harry, and he's now a Harry da Silva, and I'm like, oh, that's fine. When he told me, I had jokes for him, but it was just between us. And when I was telling my mom that he took her name, what? Why? I'm like, really? You're gonna bring that up? Am I not after my name? I'm after my grandfather. I was named after my grandfather. I'm not named after my dad. So if we're going to go that route, I'm not the. If we are doing the naming thing and the legitimacy and all that, I'm a bastard, by the way people say it. So I'm a bastard if we're going that route. So, yeah, I don't have my father's name, my biological father's name. I don't have that recognition. So I'm after my grandfather. That's who I'm named after. That's where my structure comes from, my whole naming line. And so I'm like, wow, so why are you mad that my cousin took his wife's name? You shouldn't be angry, but... It's so that's why I'm like, yeah, it's easier to say we all go with European and all that, but I'm like, there's certain times when the rules have been bent, and we don't ask why. It's just like we just go with it, and then but I'm like, when you get older, you look and like, hey, wait, when did this rule? So this person, what is the other name he could have had? And then you're like, oh man, you're like, you ask too many questions. Just go, keep quiet. I'm like, okay. So, but yeah, so when I bring up that, my kid is getting older, and I've already written down certain things, and when the older she gets, I will explain to her that, look, there's a version of your dad that could have had this name, and your name would have not been Harry, and you would have been named this, and and so, and then when I tell people that, yeah, I'm a bastard, and they're like, what? I'm like, yeah, that was actually the insults I used to get as a kid. There was when I was between 6 and 8. That was one of the first times I knew I was hurt without being beaten by other children. Was when playing with kids, and for some reason the kids just stopped, and they said, yeah, we noticed that every time we get mad, or there's a moment when kids are playing, and there's this point in time when they're like, oh, you threatened me, or you did something to me, I'll go get my dad. And when it gets to your turn, you always say, I'm going to get my uncle. You never say you're getting your dad. Why? And I had no reason, no excuse. And I thought about it, and I was like, I don't know. And they're like, you must be a bastard. That's why you keep saying that. So I started crying, and I went home. And when I asked, they were like, shut up. Don't you have food to eat? Don't you have a roof over your head? Why do you ask them so many questions? Shut up. Go sit down somewhere. Go kneel down. Pray to Jesus to forgive you. So and that's like the beginning of asking questions. And then with time, you just learn to shut up until you get older. And then you're like, hey, wait a minute. You didn't answer me when I asked that question back then.
Exactly.
They're like,
you
never
look
asked
back
questions.
and you realize. Yeah.
You never asked no questions. They gaslight you. But one thing I wanted to point out that I found interesting about your name is, Claire, your name might be similar to my daughter's name. In Nigerian speak, we'll say English name. My daughter's one of my daughter's name is Clara. but
Ah,
in the with the German spelling of K,
okay.
not C.
So I
And
guess it's the same origin, it's the same meaning, I suppose, yeah.
yes, yeah, I just thought about that the moment
Ah,
you was pointing out Claire, and I was like, oh, okay, yeah. So Clara might be from the same family tree
I
with
think so.
Claire. So
Yeah.
yeah, oh, cause yeah, as soon as her mom picked the name, I was like, okay, I gotta know the meaning of the name before you go too far with that, because that's me. I always know meaning of names.
And what
So
did you find it to be then, the meaning of the name?
Claire,
Oh,
yeah, but she was named after her maternal great grandmother.
okay.
Yeah, that's why her mom picked that name, and then my
All
mom
right.
picked her traditional name. So, that's where
Okay.
her names come from. So
Nice.
yeah, it's beautiful. And I was like, oh, you see, another connection, Claire, Clara.
Mm-hmm.
I'd never
Mm-hmm.
made that connection in the past before. So
Well, here it is.
there you go. That's why I love that question. And anybody who comes on the podcast, will always get that question. That's like a cheat question. People can, you can prepare ahead of time, but hey, I'll still find a way to twist it and then hit you, pow. And you'll be like, oh, yep, there you go. So, you've already given us a little bit of this, a little answer to this question, but for the sake of the audience, can you introduce us to your place of birth and what your childhood was like?
So I was born in Burundi, so that's in East Africa, and if I recall properly, up until the age of 3 or something, my family moved to Kenya, and that's where I grew up. So I was so because we came from a French-speaking country back then, so it was a Belgian colony. So the main language was French. We were in a French school in Kenya, in Nairobi, and that's where I grew up. That's where I kind of made my first memories and first taste in food. I always talk about food and things and the environment before my family moved to Switzerland. So my childhood basically was in Kenya, and I guess that's why lots of people, and just what you said before, are surprised, impressed, or amazed. I don't know how you want to call it, about the diversity of the guests that I speak to, because
Yeah.
for me, it's just absolutely normal. I've always been in environments where people come from everywhere. People are going everywhere.
Yeah.
People speak many languages, and people have this ability to just understand different environments because their own backgrounds is already so diverse, if you will. And that's why I lived. I was I think I was in French school, and one of my brothers was in an English-speaking school. So, and those were not the local languages. The local language was Swahili, even though there's so many other different languages, and we were speaking Kinyarwanda at home. So that gives you already a way of, an idea of how, I guess, how as a child, your brain can be also very exposed to different things. And then moving to Switzerland, obviously, I was in the French-speaking part, so which was easy because school was already in French. I didn't have to adapt in that sense. But then the first thing I learned was a new language. It was German,
Wow.
And the way my brain worked was like, oh, these words are quite similar to English, so this is going to be easy to learn. Which for people who grew up in Geneva or in other parts of the country are like, oh, but German is so difficult. And because like I had been exposed to all this, I could easily move from one to another. And I felt that even being in Geneva, so many, friends of mine at school, they were also from different places, whether it's on the African continent, in Europe, Spain, Italy, whatever. We even had like in school kids from Russia. And this is something that always impressed me, that because we would have school, I think Monday through Wednesday, and then Friday, there was like one day or one afternoon off during the week. And then they would go to school, but like Russian school. And I was like, oh, you learn Russian? No. We kind of like do the normal curriculum, but in Russian.
Oh.
So I was like, all these different, I mean, for me, it was just normal to have people who have different perspectives on life, different, various culture. I don't know how to say different because different is always compared to something else, but all this variety of culture, whether it's a language, whether it's, what you eat, even though, if you look at food properly, many things are similar, just maybe you don't use the same ingredients,
That's true.
So I guess my, in a nutshell, my childhood was quite interesting in the sense that there was, I was exposed to many different people and many different, cultures, I would say. And living in 2 different countries as well was something interesting, I have to say.
Wow. So what age were you when you arrived in Switzerland?
I was 11 or 12, I think. Yeah.
Okay.
So sort of like started my teenage years are here in Europe, in Switzerland.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, it makes sense why a lot of people send their kids to Switzerland for schooling. I know the schools are pretty good over there, and then they also have some expensive schools for people who are loaded. But it does make sense with the exposure to other cultures, and it does make sense because I don't think I think I've only thought about it like, oh, rich people just send their kids to Switzerland. And if you only just think of it from that point of view, and it's like, oh, that's a place for wealthy people to just send their kids. And then, but if you think about exposing the children to other cultures and people, it also adds another dimension to the educational system in Switzerland.
And I think that's, anyway, I suppose, I mean, again, if you're in a private setting or private school, wherever you go in the world, I would imagine that in any case, you're exposed to many different people, right? Because as you say, the wealthy you are, and that's probably the image you have of Switzerland, I guess, like the most expensive schools. But just for clarification, I was actually in a public school because when my family moved here, I was no longer, I was in a public school. So when I say I had friends from Sri Lanka, from Ethiopia, from I don't know, Peru, Italy, you name it, Portugal, this is really public school, Okay. This is like, I guess the social, the population that was in Geneva. And because also Geneva is quite international, so you would also have those private schools. And whether it's, people put their kids in private school or not, you are anyway exposed to that cultural diversity anyway, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So, and also another thing I noticed, I think, I never thought about it, but I've had a couple of people who've been through Kenya in their lives, growing up, lived in Kenya, and there's 1 or 2 of them that I will introduce you to after this recording. I think you would like to interview them, and I never just thought about it that somebody could go to school in Kenya and be educated in French. it's like, I'm just like, oh yeah, Swahili, English, yes. French, I'm like, oh, wait a minute. It's like the first time. So my brain is still like going in circles, like, wait, wow, French.
There was I think it's still there. There's a French school there. So.
It's probably I know there's, because I know there's a French school in Lagos, and
you see?
But I just, sometimes, it's good to not be ignorant. Because I actually have gone past that school, and I don't know, it's just like you don't think about certain things, and you're like, oh, French school. But it's like, oh, school with French teaching, but they will teach you in English. I don't know why. I just put that in my brain, and you don't think about certain things. Although my kid goes to a German school now in Brooklyn here. And so now
even here in Switzerland, if we talk about international school, most of them are in English, but English is not a national language at all. But so I guess you can find more or less everything.
Yes. So with that being said, staying with your childhood, at this moment, Where do you consider your favorite childhood memory to come from? And what is it? So that would be your first controversial question, by the way.
Yeah, that's a super interesting question. My first memory and where it was.
Your favorite childhood memory
Oh,
at
my
this
favorite
moment.
memory.
Yeah. I'm not making it easier for you. Oh, no, not the first.
Yeah,
your
yeah,
favorite.
no, I have to choose my favorite.
Yeah. You can make it two.
It has to be in Kenya, to be honest.
Okay, and what will it be?
There's a lot of them.
You can narrow it down to one.
So
I'll make it easy for you, but
the first one that comes to mind is spending the holidays on the coast. So basically, we were living in the capital city, which is Nairobi, and it's, well, more or less in the center of the country, I would say. And so our family had friends in Mombasa, which is on the coast of the Indian Ocean. And some of my best memories were spending holidays at their place, so the whole family there. And the reason is because we would, well, first of all, you get to be by the sea, which was for me the first time that I ever saw the sea. And something I kind of vividly remember is drinking coconut water directly from the coconuts.
Oh, that's nice.
And that's one of my favorite memories, as well as, so that was like during the day. And then in the evening, you would eat, so in the US, you say corn, right? I was raised up to say maize.
Maize, yeah, me too.
That has been barbecued, right? That has been barbecued. And you can literally, take with your hands and take the corn from your hands and eat them when that's been barbecued. I mean,
that's a roasted corn.
Yeah, roasted. Yeah.
So did they sell them on the street side?
Exactly, on the street side, with you would have cassava chips,
Oh, okay.
And all these things. So yeah.
I think
some fun memories.
So the cassava, wait, that's not roasted, the cassava chips.
No, that would be then fried, really potato chips that you would just cut, and then they would fry it, and that's something you would buy, on the street.
Oh, okay.
And in your newspaper,
Oh, yes, of course. The corn, what we call is beignet, but we call it puff puff. The same thing. Everything was newspaper wraps. Even the meat, suya, newspaper wraps. Everything was wrapped in old newspapers. Thinking, roasted corn. We had this local pear. It's like I don't think it's longer than my index finger. Yeah, my index finger might be longer than the biggest pear. The local pear that we had is purplish when they're boiled, but after you boil them, you can place them on the little grill thing, because they use cement pans, the pans that they carry on their head with cement for construction workers. I don't know if they probably still do that, because I've seen it in Middle East too. So that you put the charcoal in there and then have the little grill stuff on top, and then you have the corn on it, and that you're by the roadside, you have that on a stand, and then you approach them to get your corn, and you pick the corn that you want, and I want that one, the big one, or the one in the middle, or you don't pick the one on the side. Obviously, for some weird reason, there's some science behind that. Get the one in the middle, and then you get the pear, and the corn and the pear always go together. I've never seen that pear anywhere outside of Nigeria. It's purplish. I don't know the name, but I think I don't think that's probably local to Nigeria. It's a local small pear. I have to look it up and see what if there's another name for it. But I think we just call it local pear. That's what it's called. Yeah, but that with corn, they went together. So Mombasa. Yeah, this is the second time Mombasa has been. If someone's favorite childhood memory, and actually,
really,
one of the people I was thinking of introducing to you, that was our childhood memory. So
okay,
so I guess everything is aligned.
Another connection,
yeah. So still staying with your childhood, but we might go a little bit older. What did teenage Claire want to be or see herself as becoming if I had asked, let's say, 12, 13, 14-year-old Claire, what will she become career-wise? What did she see herself becoming career-wise?
I think teenage Claire, whether she should be 13, 14, 17, or 19, didn't have a clear career plan.
I don't think any one of us did, but we had some imagination and said, this is it. This
even a clear career goal, to be honest. I remember, I think I must have been 18 or 19, something. I was speaking with a friend on holiday. I was like, oh, when we turn 30 or something, where do you see yourself? And I was like, I don't even know where I'll be when I'm 20. Why are you asking me when I'm 30? Like, it's so far away. And for some reason, I think I never had the, I don't know how you can call that, the faculty to project myself like very, very far in the future. It's for me, it's like I can only influence here and now. And once I can do that, then when tomorrow comes, maybe I'm ready for tomorrow. Like, and this is the way I put it in words today. Like, today, like the past few years, but I guess this is already what I had as a teenager.
Yeah.
I never imagined myself being, I don't know, whatever, an artist or, Nobel Prize for whatever. There was nothing really like specific objective for me, like when I get older, like when you ask kids, like, what do you do? And the thing is, I never ask kids what they want to do. It's like, okay, what do you like doing now? And that's it, But many are like, okay, what do you want to do later? Because, okay, you have to study this and that. And for me, to be honest, where reaching to doing science and all these things was always following something that I find interesting, and especially like a field of interest where I'll be continuously learning something. Like for me, doing biology was the only thing or research or science, whatever you want to call it, was the only way I could see at that time where I would be continuously learning something new. And that was the only thing I wanted to do, was to continuously learn. I guess.
So you just enjoyed learning.
Yeah.
But you couldn't picture a way of translating that into something. You didn't know what it would turn into, but you just loved learning.
I never imagined, okay, it's going to be this, and then you're going to do this and that. And it's like, even like, say today, when you start your career and say, okay, what's your career plan? How do you find mentors, sponsors, all these things? I feel like I always followed in instinct or intuition and say, oh, that's interesting. I want to do that. Let me try that. Let me see. And after 3 years, okay, maybe this is what I've learned this. How can I now use it somewhere else? I guess that's particular to me, or that's unique to me. And it's not, as far as I know, it's not very common, in the sense that, okay, like, what's your goal? How are you going to do this? I know friends who were in school with me, like pretty young, who knew, okay, I'm going to be a doctor, or I'm going to build my business. And it was just so clear for them. And for me, I've always admired that, even like people who can be really experts and specialists in a specific field. Because for me, I just feel like the way I am, it's like a sponge. Like I take on everything.
Yeah.
And at some point I will, translate this and that, or test this into that. But I just don't see myself doing just one thing and focusing on that and just continuing, even though, I can do it. Like, I did a PhD. I knew how it was. Like, I had a specific topic, I had to do the research and everything, but then it has an end. So after that, you do something else, Yeah. So I guess that's how I've always approached, the future, so to speak.
I don't think it's only you, but I understand. I can relate to an extent, because for me, it's like my mind is always like there's 10,000 things happening at the same time, and it's like, okay, how to narrow it down to one thing, and then one part. Like, okay, that's like, I could do coaching, I could do sports coaching, I could do military, I could do supply chain, and like this, that, and then I'm like, then there's the health issues, and it's like, and then, well, sometimes like I listen to too much noise from outside too, the pressure, and then, you should be this, or you're the son, you're a son, and you should be providing this, and it's like, and then it's like, and then you don't want to look at, this, and then family brings this one has built a house and has 10 children, so What about you? And then you're like, okay, okay, so maybe in 5 years' time, I get a wife, and then I get, and then okay, and I'm a professor in this. Okay, so I like this stuff, right? So maybe I can become a professor if I can pursue this academic lane, and then this, and then that. I'm like, wait, why am I doing all this? No, it's like I push that out the window, and then so until the day I discovered I could say no, and it was not a bad thing to say no, and yeah, and then it's like I started floating in a different realm. Yeah, I used to be. I think most of my projecting into the future was kind of along that line of like, okay, so this is I just draw a map and this is da 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 da, and I was just going like pow 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 like checkpoints. I was a good immigrant African son until then. Yeah, that's what it was like. I was just okay. This how okay. This is this. I'll hit. I'll achieve all this, and then and then one day it's like no.
Yeah.
And so when the questions will come, I was just like nah, I don't feel like no, no. But yeah, it does affect, and but I do. It's not, I'm not trying to be a therapist or anything like that. I never was attracted to those fields, but I do have people who come talk to me, and I'm like, okay, man, maybe you should, I don't know, ask yourself why you're doing this or that, and it's always fascinating, especially from our communities. Those of us who left home and moved to a different continent, different environment. Yeah, and I see people who, I used to be crazy when it came to like, oh, this person had done this design and this is how they achieve all this, and then the person will run up to me. I'm like, oh man, yeah, I admire you, man. It's like you. I'm like, dude, I'm admiring you, and the person's like, no, you're the one. I'm like, oh wait, so what? I'm tripping. I'm the one tripping. So yeah, that's why I respect you being open with yours and talking about not being able to do that long-term projection, and it's not a bad thing. And I'm not saying people who've done that it's a bad thing, but it's not. If you're good at it, you're good at it, and everybody has their own way of going about life. And
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly.
but I'm just
Yeah.
pointing out that there are people who've not everybody is able to talk about it openly, and some are only able to talk about it in private, and respect to them for even still being able to talk about it, because there are some who are just drowning in it, and to everybody, they're like, whoa, success, this is great. And then that person is just literally drowning in the so-called success.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's why I like having conversations like this and just letting people know that even if you're drowning in it, I'll still seek help. There's help out there. So, with that being said, you continue. Well, we're going to move forward to your young adult days. When it came to pursuing a university education, you attended university in Switzerland, or did
Yes,
you
I
go
did.
outside of Switzerland?
No, I stayed in Switzerland. I
Were you
took the
tempted to go
opportunity.
outside?
Not necessarily, no,
Why?
because that's a good question. I never thought of going outside.
Because you could
I
speak
thought,
French, you could speak German, you could speak English.
yes, true. I could have been anywhere, to be honest. But the quality of education here is also very good,
Yeah.
and the options are pretty interesting. So, again, for me, it honestly didn't matter where I was in terms of pursuing further education, or, university education. Again, as long as I was learning something, it was interesting. So, I was first at the University of Geneva, where they had a good faculty of science. And interestingly, though, even though I didn't want to study abroad like for a whole degree, I did do I don't know if they still do it nowadays, maybe not. At a few years back, they would do this Erasmus exchange. Like either you go to another university for a whole year or for
Oh,
a
yeah.
semester or something.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, and I
Actually,
thought,
yeah.
being based in Switzerland and the fact that many universities collaborate and so on. So I actually went to Spain and spent was it 3 or 4 months? I think it was 4 months. Not an entire semester.
Okay.
Doing research in a lab, basically.
Oh, what was that experience
And
like for you?
that was really cool. That was really nice. Well, first of all, it was a bit of I don't want to say a shock, but I went to Barcelona. And for those who know, so Barcelona is in Catalonia, so which is one of the provinces, I guess you can call them like that. And the specificity about that province, I suppose maybe others like Galicia, they have their own language, but
Yeah.
their Catalan is very strong, right? It's like, and then like the first week I was there, I would see all the signs, the metro signs and everything's written in 2 languages. So there's first Catalan and then there's Spanish. And I didn't know anything about Spanish, to be honest. I kind of heard a few things before because growing up in Geneva, there's a lot of Spanish people, but I had no idea about Spanish. And that's why I wanted to do mostly an exchange with practical work and not necessarily studying like, theory and, learning about biology in Spanish because I had no idea about Spanish. But I thought being in a lab was easier to communicate because it's just about what you're doing. And for me, that was much easier. So when I got there, I was like, oh, but Spanish is so easy because in fact, Catalan, at least the way it's written, was quite close to French. In my opinion, again, it's my bias, And I was like, oh, this is going to be easy to learn. And then I realized, no, Claire, Catalan is the first language because they're very proud of the language. And then there's the Spanish. Then obviously I learned Spanish during that time, so I still understand pretty well and I can talk. But I was really surprised that it was actually 2 languages, which made it, when I moved to the German-speaking part of Switzerland a few years later, it was quite similar because here they speak Swiss German, and it's not the German you learn in school. So it feels like my brain, since the beginning, right? I've always been juggling in so many different languages that I probably have developed this ability to, to find my way through different environments. But no, I thought, staying in Switzerland and doing studies in Switzerland was quite easy. And why need to go abroad? And probably it's going to be more expensive because being in Switzerland, again, coming from public school, and you didn't have to pay that much in the end compared to a private university if I would go to, say, France or even, I don't know, Germany or the US or somewhere else. So I basically stayed in Switzerland. And I did my master's in Geneva and my PhD in Basel, so it's a different city.
Yes.
In the German-speaking part, which is bordering Germany and France, actually. Yeah.
Okay. So usually I always think that Switzerland is more expensive than other parts of Europe. So
I'm not saying it was cheap.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that studying at the university. Yeah.
About the university, exactly. I was like, I've never put 2 and 2 that
But
way,
life in general is a bit more expensive here anyway. So
okay. So, but I'm only used to, the place I've lived the most in Europe is Havixberg, closer to Münster in Germany. And so now I base my cost of living around there, and then Finland, and obviously London, but that's a big city, so that's obviously expensive. I mean, I felt it when I came from New York there, and I was like, "What? This is an apartment in London?" Like, man, you know what? I'm going back to New York.
London is super expensive. Huh?
Yeah. So, you go all the way to your master's. I think that also proves something that it's not just in America. Like we have this, it's kind of a funny saying now that, Black women, they get the degrees. And I think it's not just limited to America, it's worldwide. Black women and degrees, yay, shout out to y'all. Y'all get that degree thing going, and y'all inspire us. Like, I don't know, one day I'll try and get the master's, and I don't know, maybe I'll just go for a PhD. I don't know. I got 2 degrees, I think.
I know someone who did quite a few people who did their PhD while they were working. So, I mean, it's not, I kind of went the straight line again because, like I said before, I didn't have a specific
Hey, I thought
objective.
I would. I thought I would, and
But
yeah,
then I know people who worked quite early and then they went to do their masters later on, even their PhD after that, even with a family and kids. So, I mean, nothing is to be excluded, right?
that was the original plan, and then I was like, you know what? Yeah. Well,
You
probably
should try.
if I still had government money, I probably would have just whoops went all the way. But yeah, my next life maybe.
It's never too late. It's
Never too
never too
late.
late. You can always try.
To y'all listening, it's never too late. You know, don't be like me. Just keep going. Get it all. Get it all. But if you have, you know, free funding from the government, hey, grab it and get all your degrees. You know.
For
So,
sure.
when did you decide that you were going to, you know, stay in academia as a career path?
Actually, I didn't stay. I I left quite early.
Oh.
Because I mean, so unless you say like earning all these degrees is a career path, I mean, I don't really think so. But after the PhD, I did a little bit of research, but just 1 year, and I realized this is not necessarily for me. I didn't want to stay in academia and do the whole research thing and apply for grants every year and do all these things and the competition to have your data published. No, I mean, it's super competitive, right? Let's be honest, academia is very competitive. And I suppose that's not my nature to be super competitive. So I was like, no, this is not for me. And I went into the private sector. So I basically moved to the life science industry. And that's where I spend most of my life, because that was 14 years altogether, almost a decade and a half. And I worked in different companies, different roles. And for me, that was much more exciting and interesting, because like each new role I would take on, I would try to figure out, okay, what did I learn in the previous one to help me move on the new one? And that's where, I mean, if you look at my CV and my career there, maybe you can say, okay, she had a clear path. She went from this, from a more like back office role, so to speak, to a role that's more exposed to working with, you know, healthcare providers and so on, to leading a team, to leading a department. So I kind of went that path. I did do it, right?
Yeah.
But then it was not like an objective in itself for me. It was more like, okay, how far can I go with what I know? Basically, that was just the with my experience, you know, that was the point, to try. And because I worked also in different companies, you know, it was every 2-3 years I was changing. So is that, I guess, that how can you call it, that curiosity fact, to say, okay, I've worked in this disease area. What happens in cardiology, for example? Is there an opportunity in the company for something else? So it's always looking for that next thing where I could perhaps challenge myself again.
Yeah.
Because I suppose when I am challenged, that's where I get the most resources and, you know, be creative. If I'm too comfortable, I suppose that's not really, how can I say this? It's not really driving me, so to speak. So I guess that was the whole, but I did do that corporate career path, if you want to look at it from that lens.
Yeah.
From coming in as not a junior, but, you know, like a more, I would say, reactive role, to something more proactive, to leading a team and a department and so on. So, and that was always interesting. Like all the companies that were different, and just like any other industry, you know, you would have a company that would acquire a startup, but then a larger company would buy you, so the dynamic would change. And for me, it was always a question of, okay, is it fitting with what I want right now or not? And if not, then I look for something else.
So I have a friend who he's worked with. He's done a startup or two. He's currently in academia, and you know, bouncing both startups, and he has his own startup with his wife, and they're both in academia, and they also have a not-for-profit thing that they're also attached to, and the thing with the competitiveness of academia is also I mean, he's talked about that. You know, we get into conversations about on that, and it's like, oh, but at the same time, I try to gauge what attracts or what encourages them going forward. And, I don't want it to just be like a downer when I'm talking to them. So for you, do you prefer the startup side of things, or do you prefer the more established um, companies out there? Or,
There's a, there's
which ones hold your interest the most?
there's pros and cons for everything.
Yes, I
And
agree.
to be honest, I think if I knew before how things were, I'm also the type of person who first tests before going into something. So I guess that's also the scientific part where you do experiments, right, in the
That's
lab
right.
and have your theory and so on. I don't know what is. It all depends. Like, what is your objective? Like, what do you want out of this role or this part of your life where you want to be an entrepreneur or you want to be an employee? I guess you have to ask yourself the right questions first, because whether it's corporate or established company, whether it's more startup or entrepreneurial, you need to be ready for it.
Yeah.
And maybe in your early 20s, you're probably much better. I mean, I have to say right now, the younger generation, I'm quite surprised and very much impressed at the way lots of people are entrepreneurs, so to speak. And because my upbringing, and I went regular school, university, so it always has been a certain fixed environment, right?
Yes.
And that's the environment in which I developed my thinking, who I am, and so on. But now that I'm also like I ventured out somehow and I'm doing my own thing through the podcast, using the podcast to earn like other engagement, speaking, moderating, everything, I see that actually everybody can do anything. But then I was not exposed to that before to make a more, not the ideal decision, or at least the decision that was right for me, maybe in my mid-20s, for example, right? It's just that the decisions I've always made were from what I knew. And back then, I only knew about academia. I mean, continuing your path.
Yeah.
And eventually finding a job at some point. Not that I didn't know that anything else existed, but I was not exposed to that. Like we were speaking before about being exposed to different cultures and languages and everything.
Yeah.
Like I could easily go and spend 4 months in Barcelona and so on, but it was still in this context of it's academic. I'm doing my research. I'm not just going to do some, that's the way I could sell it. I'm not just going to Barcelona to be in Barcelona. I can get my credits and come back, and then it's not like a semester lost, right?
That's right.
So I guess it was easier for me to be in the corporate side of things. And I also see that being in the corporate side of things, you don't necessarily have that, I don't want to say necessarily freedom, but the openness to try and test things, because you're in a certain environment, you need to give out a certain, if you have a budget, if your department has a budget, there's just so much you can do, because if you don't finish that budget, then next year you don't have the budget. But if you're working on your own, it's like, okay, I need to get my clients first. And maybe you can be more creative in that sense. Let's say like in the corporate environments, your margin of creativity is not as large as if you're in a startup, for example. And I don't know if there's one that I prefer over another. I guess it's important to ask yourself, whoever is listening or wondering, like, what do I want for myself right now? And if this is not right for me, where can I find something else? And where can I find people to help me or to learn more about this and try if it's good for me or not? At least that's the way I approach things,
Yeah.
But maybe I can also, I'm lucky to do that because as you said, I went all the way through university to have a certain degree. And once I'm on the labor market, obviously I have a certain value in the sense that, okay, she earned that. So we know she can, so maybe it's easier for me to say that today because I went through all that. So if someone is maybe now in the early mid-20s and they just, don't even have a university degree, but then in the end, it's how you also tell the story about your own journey. So it's your narrative, right? So what do you bring? And I think today, many things have changed as far as I can tell. And maybe even corporates or startups, people are more open to so-called non-linear career paths, right?
True. True.
And perhaps that someone who's in their mid early 20s today have different options than I had back then, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say the environment plays a role, but it's also about what is good for you, and only you can answer that question for yourself, not anybody else, you know.
Adapting to the environment.
Yeah.
That's a big one. So you mentioned moderating, and how did you get into moderating? How did that even happen?
Through the podcast.
So it's the podcast was
I
first.
pitched myself as a moderator for events because
Mhm.
podcasting is basically moderating, right? More or less. You have people on, and I have to say, I had been also doing some of these. Yeah, someone asked me the other day, yeah, but now you're doing something totally different. You're no longer in science. I mean, obviously, no, I'm no longer in life science per se. But if you look at every step of the way, whether it was through academia, even like life sciences and what I do now, if I narrow it down to one thing in common, is about communication. So whether I was doing research, you would go to Congress and you communicate your results, right? You either
Yeah.
present a poster, you present at an oral session, you write whatever, no, peer-reviewed article, everything. You're always talking about what you're doing. When I was in the life science industry, it was more or less the same thing, whether it was, as a medical information manager, it was more reactive. People would come and ask us questions on the drugs that the company developed, the data behind the clinical trials and all these things. And when I worked with HCPs so healthcare professionals to set up like continuing medical education events and all these things, or when I had advisory boards or even a symposium at a congress, it was all about communicating the data, the science behind. And today, podcasting, I mean, that's what you're doing, right? It's about sharing other people's stories, about how do you communicate that, how do you bring that about. So if there's like one red thread, one common thing about all these things, it's always been about communicating and sharing those stories, whether it's in the science, whether it's in the private sector, whether it's now in what I call social impact, because I'm amplifying these stories, whatever the field it is, healthcare, education, and so on. So yeah, I think it's been always the same thing, actually. It's just a different setting now. And now I get to choose what story I talk about. So who do I talk about? And for me, being a moderator is kind of like the combination of all of that, because it's about something that's interesting, but then I'm bringing different perspectives together for a specific time. If it's an event, for example, one of the great things I've done was for this local film festival here in Zurich, and it's called Films for Future. They focus a lot on environment and other social issues. And it has been so fascinating because, well, first of all, I get to see so many interesting documentaries, but then like after the screenings, you have either an expert in the field or the filmmaker who's there, and you get to talk with them and connect them with the audience. And that's, even though podcasting is like not live in the sense that now your audience is going to listen to this after we recorded, but being a moderator is really doing it live. I mean, you can also do live podcast recording, right?
Yes.
But I guess being a host is the same as being a moderator. You're bringing like one information from one side and you're connecting it to some other people who are going to listen to it. And for me, that's how I connect both things.
So there's a science to being a moderator or being a host of a podcast. There's a science behind it.
That's my explanation, my interpretation. Whether it's scientifically quote unquote proven, I don't know.
I'm going with that.
But
there's a clip. So from the sports world, there's a show on Fox Sports. I think it's called Undisputed. Is it Undisputed? Yeah, Skip Bayless. He's having a bad time right now. And if you want an example of how not to be a good host, go watch that show. You don't even need to watch the whole show. Just watch clips of it on any social, and you're gonna laugh. And he messed up his. He had a great co-host in the past, and he was. I'm assuming most people don't know people who listen to this podcast, I'm assuming you don't know who he is, and it was racial what he did to his co-host. It's a live show, and he literally said, "Shut up, boy," to a big black man live on TV. And dude had to control himself because you could tell he was about to grab this man, and that was the end of the great relationship they had. Well, and since then his show has been going down, and now they've just been bringing anybody they can find to be on the show, and his face when he's lost total control, and everybody's just talking, and he's there looking like, oh man, what did I do? What did I do? And I'm like, yeah, if you want an example of how not to be a terrible host, he tried talking one time, and it's like nobody's even paying attention to you on your own show, and they're just talking over him. And I'm like, yeah,
wow.
There's a science to being a host.
Yeah,
To
I guess there
moderate
is.
him, because he's there literally on his own show, and like 4 people are talking over him, and he's just there like,
Yeah.
this is bad. This is
Yeah,
bad
yeah.
on TV. Yeah, so one last thing on moderating. What has been your most, can you share one fun experience that, just a fun moment, a memorable moment that you've had from moderating?
A memorable moment.
Yeah.
I think one that, okay, this doesn't even relate to what I'm doing today, but one of my last positions, one of the companies I worked with, we had this special day where we invited I think it was two co-founders of a patient association. And, I just volunteered with one of my colleagues to say, okay, we're going to moderate this session. And because these two guys were coming from the French-speaking part of the country, I was like, okay, yeah, I can do it. And it's going to be in French and, English, blah, blah. And I realized that it was the first time that I was doing simultaneous translation because we would actually ask them the questions in English. And because I think only one of them spoke English, if I'm not mistaken, and the other one, or was it both? Anyway, at least one of them was not speaking English. And then the thing is, I would kind of like translate after that the answer. And it's amazing how you can focus your brain on something. Obviously, for a given moment, it was not 2 hours, right? It was probably 45 minutes or something. That was quite impressive because I had no idea whether it was going to work or not. I just thought, oh, let's try this. You never know. And we did have a few people who spoke French, but the thing is, we wanted everyone to understand. So we had more or less like the questions we would ask so that they would prepare. But when it comes to a live event, you never know. And that was amazing how, I was impressed of how much you can focus your brain on specific things, when you say, okay, this is what I'm going to say. And then to manage to ask the next question, obviously I was co-moderating, so I had someone else doing it. But that was interesting. That was a memorable, memory.
Wow.
Yeah.
You know what? You just gave me a new goal. I'll one day, when I'm good enough to interview someone in English and German, then that'll be the new goal. Translate, get English and German at the same time. Yeah, and and translate and then deliver in both English and German. Yeah.
And if you're a sports fan, at least this is what happens very much here in Europe is, whenever you're watching either football competition, I'm speaking of football because the Euro was just not long ago.
Oh yes, I was there.
Or even like track and field or any other sports, most of the time now athletes are being interviewed right after, like even tennis, right?
Yes.
Even tennis, they're interviewed. Like for instance, I'm thinking now Roland Garros, which is in France, and most of the players who are not French, then they will be interviewed right after the game. And you see how the host is switching from one language to another. Sometimes that's exactly what happened, So and that was interesting because I had seen that a lot, and I was like, okay, now I'm doing this. This is cool.
It is cool.
Yeah.
Mad impressive. If I had the clapping soundbite, I would have, So I just clap for you. Get your flowers. That's impressive. So
thank you.
Yeah, one thing I noticed on your website was you had this phrase, leading with compassion. So before I move on to the other segment that I like moving on to, I just had to get, what does that mean? Leading with compassion. What does it mean to you and why is it important?
For me, it's important because for me, when you're a leader, first of all, you have to do your best to include everyone, whatever that means, in the sense that everybody's voice has to be heard on the team and so on. But it's also your work as a leader to try and figure out, okay, who is good at this, who needs help here and there. And it's all about the people in the end. That's why the word compassion for me comes down to people who are not basically you, people who are on your team. How do you lead them in whatever their objectives are, as in their career, for example, or whatever it is. I remember I had one of my team members in one of the teams that I led. There was like a big change within the company, and then they felt a bit like, not frustrated, but some roles were changing names, but then their role didn't change name. I was like, yes, but look at what you're doing. You're the only one doing exactly that. Nobody else in the company is doing what you're doing, right? You're working on this super product. You're doing all these things. We have only this type of trial here, and you're the one who is doing the liaison with the other regional teams and so on. Nobody else has the same role as you. So it's about also bringing back the focus, or at least bringing them, how can I say this? In French, you say relativiser. I don't know how you say this in English. I'm just missing the words right now. It's like changing perspective, okay?
Yeah.
It's like you see all these, like you were saying before, right? You were saying that you admire this friend of yours and how they've been through their whole career. And they were like, no, but I admire you. Look what you've done and everything. You always see the outside, but you don't see the inside. And I think for me, compassion is just reminding people, okay, look at the inside as well. First of all, there's just one like you, and look at what you're doing. Nobody else is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And sometimes we forget that people also look at us in a different way than we look at ourselves.
That's true.
So for me, that's also leading with compassion, is reminding people on your teams, like, yeah, don't have to compare. I mean, it's good to compare in the sense that, okay, what can you learn from them, or how can they support you in reaching your objective as well? And that's the other thing. For me, collaboration is more important than competition. Maybe because, like I said before, I don't have this competitive spirit. Even when I used to play like sports, I'd rather play team sports than having to run, doing like track and field or whatever, where there's this one winner and then everybody else loses.
Yeah, I only won 100-meter race, and that was it. After that, I was like, yeah, come. Now, I ain't running against nobody after that. That was the end.
You see, so like, having that collaborative spirit as well, and making sure that people are actually comfortable, because when you feel good, at least in my opinion, is when you bring out the best in yourself, and then that's when you also find solutions you didn't think about. So for me, that's the part that I put under this compassionate leadership.
Awesome. Thank you for that.
That's how I see it, yeah.
Thank you for that. I like that. It's something that I lean heavily towards too, but just wanted to hear it in your own words. So now we're going to jump into some of the most controversial things that I've been keeping on the side. We've talked some very deep stuff, beautiful stuff. However, let me channel some Stephen A. Smith.
However, now I am on the grill.
Yes. Stephen A. Smith does that a lot. So he's always like, I love this sister. She's a great sister. She's one of the best sisters out there. However, you're like, oh, Lord, here it comes. Here it comes. Here it comes. Oh, okay. That's another question I forgot to ask. But, we're still also part of the howevers. However, okay. So why is audio storytelling important to you? You know what? Yeah. Why is that? That means you lean onto podcasting is purely audio. Why do you belong to that camp? I have an idea why, but got to hear it from you.
Because if I listen to someone, or if someone is listening to the conversation I'm having, for instance, say you're on my show and we're having this conversation, I think just listening to it, you are more attentive, like your attention is really focused. That being said, having video and audio, for me, you are reaching out to two of your senses, and you can't have both of them accurate at the same time. Again, this may be not scientifically proven, but that's my personal experience, right? Maybe I would look at okay, I'm looking at Raphael. Oh my God, he has a great screen behind. How is it that he has a recording studio and he has his label of the podcast in the back? Although I'm still listening to what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
So depending on how your mind works, it might be, at least because maybe I'm someone who's, like I was saying before, I like a sponge. I just absorb everything. I just need this one focus, and then I can. Doesn't mean that I'm not focused if I'm not watching TV or documentary, But if the image is supporting what you're saying, it's fine. But for me, if the image is just a conversation between two people, yeah, I don't need the image. The audio is enough. That's why I want to focus only on audio. And coming back to radio, probably, obviously, maybe you know that as well. But like growing up in Africa, and radio is something super, super strong and super important. And I think even today, even in Europe, like when you're driving, you're listening to music, you're listening, and there's always radio there, right? But for me, I feel like radio is much more powerful than having, audio alone, than having both audio and video. Although lots of people say, if you want to reach out to a new audience, you never know, have your podcast on YouTube, have a few things. And some people even just tune into YouTube just to listen. They don't use the video.
Yeah.
Well, first of all, for me, it defeats the purpose of having a video. So why not just listen to it in a different app? But if it's the case, it's the case. That's how it is. And maybe at some point I would have some video. But to be honest, it's not a priority for me. Audio is much more powerful. It's like having a conversation with someone. Yeah, I don't know. And when you remember things, at least for me, back in my childhood, there's this. And when we were like much younger, we would be told like stories. It's kind of like bedtime stories, if you will. But these are always like stories with like moral or something. There's some sort of underlying message or whatever.
Yeah.
But it was always like the oral tradition, right? It's not that it was shown with drawings or something, or at some point there was video, like maybe recently. It's still, for me, the oral tradition is so strong and so important that today translating it into audio, like the new medium, is just like a natural continuation of it. So that's why I think audio storytelling is super important. And by the way, you can't have video without audio. So audio is important.
It's still important.
So, you see?
Well, you're right. Radio is king. I grew up with radio. Without radio, I wouldn't been doing this. That was the first influence on me. I was that weird kid who listened to AM over FM a lot. That's how I found.
So maybe it's a generational thing. This is probably our generation, and maybe youngsters today just don't care.
I traveled to other worlds through radio, and that's why I loved AM back in the days, because I could find radio stations in other parts of the world and other places. So, that was a huge influence on me. And then, it was there was an interview with Roy Wood Jr., the comedian, and that's how I realized that, there's something I used to say in the past where I was like, I didn't know black voices on the radio. It was mostly white voices, and that's how I used to like tell myself that, because I had the chance to be on radio before I left Nigeria. I had the chance to be on radio twice, and I was like, oh, my voice doesn't sound like a professional, so I ran away. I literally ran away. And but it was something I programmed into myself. But I heard black voices, but you don't, that's the disadvantage. Like I had no picture of who was speaking, so I couldn't tell. But Roy Wood Jr.'s dad was one of the people I'd heard, because when I heard that interview and he's talking about his dad wasn't always around, but his dad was traveling and was reporting on he mentioned the radio station. I was like, yeah, I did hear your dad. Yeah.
Mm.
He was one of the people I was hearing. And I was like,
Oh, wow.
So I was hearing some black voices, but I didn't know what black people
You didn't
sounded
know.
like.
True.
So-
That's the disadvantage. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Let's
yeah,
say what
so-
it is. It's the
but-
disadvantage of audio. Right?
It wasn't. But at that also I was pretty young, and if everything that had been told around me then was like it's only white people that are in those spaces, then at that age I started thinking only white people walk there. You don't think there's other people who walk there. You don't think there's diversity. I didn't know the language of diversity, so yeah, it's not really. The disadvantage was in not knowing, the ignorance that only one type of people walked in those places. So by the time I was given the opportunity to go be on radio, and somebody was just going to take me to his friend's radio station. I was like, yeah, state radio, come do like 10, 15 minutes. I was like, and I ran away. I was like, no, I don't sound like those people. So, no. And
But you did do radio before even podcasting, you mean?
no, I was afraid. I was like, why would who won't listen to my voice? But every time they had arguments in the house, people said, this guy's voice, the opinions he has, he needs to be on radio or TV.
Okay.
So the guy's like, and this is somebody who didn't like me. He didn't like me. I knew he didn't like me in the family, but he was like, I'm going to see my friend. I'm going to the radio station. I'll take you with me. On Saturday, we're going. So you're going to be on air for like 10, 15 minutes. And I was like, yeah, I don't sound like those people. So I ran away. I just disappeared from the house on the day of. And second time he was going to do it again. And I was like, yeah, okay, we're going at what, 9 o'clock? Okay, 8 o'clock, I disappeared.
Oh, so
Yeah.
you disappeared the second time as well.
Yeah, second time I was and this is the type of opportunities people have been looking for. But you don't,
Yes.
I was like 21, 22,
Okay.
but it was panic. I was just panicking then. And even, was it this week or last week? I heard radio is still king right now. I saw one report and they were talking about, was it, I forgot what they were, where I heard it, but they were talking about on cars, you enter the car and, they were talking about podcasting, some issues podcasting still faces, how you get into a car and you automatically turn the car on, the radio is playing, so you can't just turn on the car and the podcast starts playing. You have to go find the podcast that
Exactly.
you listen to and get it on and, get it into the car, audio system kind of thing, but your radio is there. Most people already have their radio station automatically tuned,
Pre-programmed. And
pre-programmed.
it just automatically
so
starts.
it's
Yeah.
something that podcasting still has to struggle with when it comes
Yes.
to why radio is still king. And this is in America, not even the Africa that they're talking about. This is a problem in America, and like podcasting is dealing with. So just that alone, and I was like, yeah, that's why most times you meet people and like, hey, I have a podcast, and you have to walk them through it. You have to be patient and all that. And what's the easiest way that I tell people? Just like, I have a YouTube, and you
Yeah,
can listen
it's
to it on
true.
YouTube. And they're like, I just say you can listen. I'm like, no, if you want to watch, join Patreon. The video is on Patreon. And yeah, if you're really about watching, then go join my Patreon. The video is there. That's why I only have the video on Patreon. I don't have a video for you to watch on YouTube. But if you listen, you can play it on YouTube and you have it playing in the background. That's it. And if you're really committed, then Patreon. Yeah. So, moving on now, the main controversy. Here we go.
Wait.
Oh, yeah,
Can
go
I
ahead.
also have so you asked me why audio storytelling is powerful?
Oh, yes,
And obviously-
sorry.
But then you said you have your own idea, but can you share your idea and tell me why you think it's powerful?
Oh, it tied into. I think you answered. It was in your answer there with your answer on the radio. When I came into podcasting, I think right from the beginning, I always believed in audio over video, and although I'm not against video, some people it works better for them with video, and I'm not against that. And if you support me on Patreon, hey, that works better. But as someone who grew up with the audio world, traveling my mind to, well, I know the power of audio storytelling, and the stuff you talked about with the kids, the storytelling. We also had Tales by Moonlight. That's what ours was called. There was some dramatic reenactment of part of it, but for the most part, half of, I think 60% to 70% of the stories were told, and then there would just be like one or two scenes reenacted, because some of it were animals, and this was back when they didn't have budget for CGI and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, we at home we'd be like, man, that's a terrible animal. Like, come on. But one story that I always remember comes from that program, and it's the story of the guy who wanted to collect all the wisdom in the world, and he went around the world collecting the whole wisdom. I don't know if you know a calabash.
Yes.
Okay, so he gets all the wisdom in the world, stores it in a calabash, and says he will be the only person to have this wisdom in the world. All the wisdom in the world, and he will store it on a palm tree. Now he's trying to climb this palm tree, and he's struggling with climbing the palm tree. He has the calabash on his stomach, and he's trying to climb the palm tree. And a kid is walking by and sees this man with the calabash on his stomach, and the kid is like, "What are you doing? That's not how you climb a tree with a calabash. You're supposed to fling it on your back. You don't know how to climb a tree." And the kid walks away, and the man is like, "Oh my goodness. You mean I have all the wisdom in the world and I don't know how to climb a tree with a calabash?" And in anger, he smashes the calabash on the ground, and all the wisdom escapes. And that's why we are all wise. Everybody has this wisdom. Wisdom returns back to all over the world. And I was like maybe 9 or 10 or 11 if I was too old. And I was like, what the hell, man? That man was stupid. I remember watching that. I was like, "Come on, stupid." That's what. And at school, we're all laughing about it. But I never forgot that story. I forgot a whole bunch of stories from it. If I go on YouTube, I think on YouTube you can still find episodes of Tales by Moonlight. But I never forgot that story. And every time I bring it up on the podcast, people are like, "Wow, yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense." You can never stop learning. You can never claim, I got all the information in the world, I got all the wisdom. Yeah, no. You always see somebody who, when you say you got everything, you always run into somebody who's like, and you go make you look stupid. And at age 11, I heard that story and I was like, oh, come on, that's not. So that was the power of audio storytelling. And and because I don't remember the visuals from that story. I don't recall the visuals, but the audio still stuck with me.
Yeah.
So that alone is just the example that I need, and that's all the motivation that I need when it comes. That's just my answer with audio storytelling right there.
I hear you.
Yeah. So now I'm hoping this will give me one of the controversies that I need.
Another one.
Oh, okay. We'll see. Yeah, no, this is the main one. This is the main one.
Okay,
the main one that should be the main start of the howevers. So you you have experienced different cultures. You've lived in different parts of Switzerland and Europe, Africa included. When it comes to your favorite go-to cuisine, what is it? And you got to betray somebody, obviously. So that's where the controversy comes
My
in.
favorite go-to what?
Your go-to cuisine. What's your favorite go-to cuisine?
Oh,
Yeah, the
this is
betrayal.
not a good question.
Now the betrayal.
This is not fair.
Yep, one culture. Get ready. Start sharpening your pencils and pens.
Okay, maybe I have an answer, but it's not precise. I say East African.
It's East African?
Yeah.
What? Oh, but you're going to claim a whole region.
It goes from injera,
Yeah, injera. Ethiopian?
Ethiopia, yes, to how is it? To to chapatis. You know, chapati.
Oh, no. I see what you're trying to do here. Trying to be diplomatic. No. We want a diplomatic spot. We want some countries to start writing and say, she's not one of us. We deny her right now.
I don't care what they say.
No. We want to start get your pencils and paper, start writing. And, I will give you her mailing address and you can write straight to her. But if you pay me, just €5, $5.
Chapati, samosa, which is kind of like a mix between Indian. Obviously, it's Indian influence from East African coast of Kenya and Tanzania. So chapati, samosa.
Any drink to go with that?
Drink. Oh, interesting enough. I don't have a favorite drink. No, I don't.
No, you can't claim all of them.
No, drink.
You gotta be completely betrayal.
I don't know. And then the thing I like about from Rwanda, from basically my heritage, is cassava. Cassava leaves. We cook them like spinach somehow.
Oh, well.
And the cassava.
Liberians have that on lockdown.
It's kind of like, yeah.
I think we'll give that to Liberia. So Rwandans, you can still complain too. She's choosing Liberia over you. So write in Rwanda, Kenya. Look, Kenya, you give her.
But if I have, if you want me to choose like one only from those, I would still say that it's injera, Ethiopian, or Eritrean, because I suppose this is what has also strongly marked my childhood in Kenya. We used to eat that a lot, and I love the injera bread. For some reason,
that bread is you can't go wrong with that bread.
Yeah.
You can't go wrong with that bread. I give you that.
That would be my all favorite over everything else if I have to choose one. But obviously it's it's my childhood food, right? So
Kenyans, you can still write in and complain. Even Tanzanians, just because they love coming your way. So write in and complain. Write to her, not me. But I'm just the messenger. So I'm doing my job. So complain.
If you have a good recipe for chapatis, you know how to do chapati, send me the recipe, because this is the one thing I still haven't.
I like the twist in there.
How to do.
I like the twist in there. How we twisted in it.
I'm reaching out to your audience now. I'm tapping into your wealth. I need to learn how to cook chapati.
Oh man, I love that. Yeah, that's another question I love asking. Because be surprised.
You didn't see that coming, right?
I didn't see that coming. That's a good twist. Now, the next question, on this one, we'll see how you answer this. So, everybody who appears on this podcast is considered a dancer, and you can't claim, I don't dance. It's too late, because if you claim that, we'll stop recording and kick you out of the show. So wait a minute. They're considered a dancer even before you ask them. So you have them on and you assume they're dancers. It's not assume. It's once you come on the podcast, only dancers appear on this podcast. So you can't claim, I don't dance. My man don't dance. That's too late. You're already a dancer. So now we need you to give us at least 3 artists that can keep you dancing for an hour. Now there's a caveat. It gotta be.
What's the caveat?
Yeah.
I was preparing the list in my mind already.
Oh, don't worry. I know where you were going, but I got you. That's why I'm here. I'm here for you. So 3 or 4 artists that can keep you dancing for at least an hour.
Mm-hmm.
You can't give us English. You can't give us an artist. You got to give us artists from. We'll make it from each language. Each of the languages that you speak. We'll limit it to the languages that you speak. So English, everybody knows English. There's too many popular artists. So let's keep English. And that includes like Afrobeats. We don't do Afrobeats on this podcast. So Afrobeats out in English. So I'm helping you here. I'm helping you. So now you can.
Are you really?
Yes. I'm helping you, making it easy for you. So. Now you can give us 3 or 4 artists from the languages.
Who don't sing in English.
Mm-hmm. We like discovering artists here, and so there you go. There are too many English singing artists, so who needs that? We don't. So let's go.
It bears the question: do I listen to artists who don't sing in English? I'm just wondering right now.
Well, that is my problem.
Yes.
It's all yours now. You said you already had the list ready, so that's good.
No, I
That's
actually
good.
had the one. They all sing in English. The ones I was thinking about.
Well, too bad.
Yeah, too bad. Huh?
I kind of how to make it easier for you. So so I had to
How
take.
can you make it easier?
I had to make it easier for you, so I took out the English.
Can we do this in part 2 of the podcast?
Part 2 will be a whole different. Yeah, I
And
was
then I
hit you with
prepare
another
my,
music question, but it'll
and
be.
then I will have a link to my Spotify playlist
Oh,
for
you
your
can pull up your
audience,
Spotify and spy quickly. If the artist is too popular, so I might take off the artist name again. So, let's see which ones.
There's one at least. Okay, now if I'm thinking, there's one that a friend of mine sent me, but I think it's been already 2 or 3 years ago, and I think he's Kenyan. Either it's a collective or it's one of the singers. He's called, or his group is called Sauti Sol.
Sauti Sol. Oh, I like that. I like them.
I'm sure you know him, right?
like
Or
them.
them, or
Yeah, I think they broke up
right now. If it's the collective, and then they have each have their own,
didn't they break
individual careers.
I thought they broke up.
That would be one I could think of.
Okay, I'll accept them. Nobody has mentioned Sauti Sol on this podcast, so okay, we accept that.
Wait a minute, Sauti Sol, and
you can do it. I believe in you.
This is awful. I think I listen to only English. You're making me realize that my musical diversity isn't that diverse.
See? Yeah, you see, that's why I'm here. I'm glad I could.
So now I need to challenge myself again.
To update your music list. They got some fire. You don't have some fire artists in Switzerland who sing in French or Italian? Or...
So there's this one. I mean, she sings more ballads than something that would keep you dancing all the time, but she's a French artist.
You don't dance ballads?
Her name is Iseult, so Yeult. And I think she first appeared several years ago on a TV show where she was competing as a singer, and then afterwards she made her own career as an independent musician.
Oh.
She's not so much but some of I have to say her own songs are more like slower ballads, but then some of the collaborations she's had, and she sings only in French, are much more like dancing songs, I would say.
Okay.
She's pretty good.
We'll let that slide. Okay.
And then a third one, honestly, I don't. You see, I even open up my Spotify account to check my liked songs. I don't see only English songs.
All right, give us one of.
This is a shame. I have only English. Oh my goodness, you got me here.
All right, let's have one or two English. Let's see the first two English names that you give us. English singing artists that you give us. It can be Beyonce, Rihanna, or Burna Boy.
No Beyonce, no Rihanna, no Burna Boy.
Yeah. So I'm making it easier for you, but let's see.
Missy Elliott.
Ooh, okay. I love Missy Elliott. That's also amongst popular names, but all right. Well, my bias were kicking there. I love Missy Elliott a lot.
Yeah.
And my second niece was a big fan of Missy Elliott. So, all right.
And then for me, it's if you go to hip hop, really, there's maybe it's old school now, but groups like Tribe Called Quest and De La Soul for me are my favorite, really.
Okay, because we
De La Soul. By the way, De La Soul was one of my best concerts I've ever been to when I was studying in Basel. Oh. And I think they were at the end of their tour at some point. It was in the summer, and one of the group members had his birthday at that point, and it was one of the most unforgettable concerts I've ever been to.
Wow. All right. Well, New York can't hit you. Those are you called some solid names. There's all right. So
yeah, those are the classics, right?
Yeah. So,
but I have to say, you just made me realize something. Yeah. I listen to music sung mainly in English.
Yeah. I'm surprised too.
And this is really surprising. I need to reconsider all of this.
Don't worry. Next time, I know how I'll hit you next time on the music question. Oh, it's going to be fun.
I don't know if I'm coming back for part 2 now.
Oh, man, this is great. So I can't thank you enough for giving me your time. And at the final question, this is your freestyle moment. So the final question is always where you get to, the final question is just a final question. It's your freestyle moment, and you answer.
I can say anything I want.
Yeah, as far as it's not something that'll make me take cover and run away with my laptop and like, oops, I gotta go. Be like the views of Claire are not the views of White Label American. Yeah. But it's your freestyle moment. There you go.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for connecting with me, because I remember, I think it was early 23, right? We were both interviewed by Talib Jazir on the Afros Audio Black History Month. And you immediately connected with me. And that was amazing. It was really cool because I didn't think that I would connect with people during this interview series, right?
Yeah.
And opening up to this whole podcasting community, which for me, living in Europe and all you guys being there, but still it has an international flair, so to speak. That was really amazing. And for inviting me as well, for considering that my journey is worth being shared on your show, because I know you have also a great audience. So I'm happy to be part of this series of your podcast. And in general, I think honestly for me, since I started podcasting, and to whoever is listening out there and maybe are hesitating, I don't know what to do, whatever you do, whether it's podcasting or not podcasting at all for that matter, put yourself out there and just try and do things, because like we were saying before, there's just so much that we as humans, I would say, or like at least in our societies nowadays, we think too much about ourselves, but this is most of the time not what others see about us, what other people see about us. And if we just try and do something that you think is interesting, something that you think makes you feel good and you can help other people, just do it. You never know what's going to lead you. I mean, exactly, what is it? Today is July, exactly, July 2024. In July 2020 is when I had the idea to start my podcast. Just like an idea.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
And I attended this masterclass workshop thing, and I realized, podcasting is actually an industry. I had no idea it was an industry. I was listening to podcasts all my life, but I didn't know it was an industry. And then a month later, I'm like, okay, what's it going to call? How am I going to do it? And I gave myself an objective to say, I try this 6 months. We see how it works out, but I want something out before the end of the year. And here I am talking to you about my childhood, about what kind of music I listen to that is not English, and many other things. So I think you never know with who you connect. And inevitably, when you really go out and do what feels right to you, you attract the people who also help you on that path and on that journey. I mean, I've been doing this for almost 4 years. I'm self-employed now for almost 2 years, but it's 2 years, 4 years is nothing in a lifetime. I mean, I've lived so many decades. I don't know what's going to happen next, but I'm just trying, and I think everybody's just trying to be happy on this earth and, feel good.
Yeah.
So as long as you have that in mind and make sure you attract the right people, I think everything should be good normally. And today we have so many ways and so many opportunities and tools to connect with each other that, without tech, even though I was speaking about audio being a powerful storytelling tool, without having all these tech things, I would have never done a podcast, because like 90%, up to 90% of the people I spoke to was just like you, like this. We're connecting through either Zoom, either whatever other platform, and they're somewhere else in a different city of this country where I live in Switzerland, or even on a different continent. And, wherever we are very similar, and we find a way to connect anyway. So
That's right.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to listening more of your content. I'm following you anyway, and thank you for tuning into my show as well and for inviting me. So it's been a pleasure, and I think I'll get ready for part 2 next time.
All right. Don't worry, you will see that question coming.
I will send you the questions before. It's not going to be freestyle like now, Well, I said, it's a Sunday afternoon for me. This is great. It's the end of the week. I will sit down with Raphael. We'll have the cool chat.
I didn't know there was
going to be. I didn't know there was going to be so many howevers and howevers and howevers again.
Don't worry. I appreciate you, my sister. You're great. So please let the people know where they can find you and how to get in touch.
Sure. So I'm mostly active on LinkedIn. So if you type my name, Claire Murigande, Murigande, so you'll find me there. That's where I'm posting every now and then on different things, what I'm doing. And to follow the podcast, so the name of the podcast is Narratives of Purpose. And I have to say, for some reason, I didn't check. Again, I started 4 years ago. I have no idea of when I did my website in the beginning. I could have changed the name, but I never changed it, so it stayed. And if you want to listen to all the episodes with the transcript and find out more about the podcast and additional content, so you just go to narratives-of-purpose.podcastpage.io. So it's really long, but once you get there, you have, anything you want to know about the podcast, about me, and about my guests as well. So yeah, just tune into that. And if you want to connect, I'm on LinkedIn.
All right. And all that will be in the show notes. Remember, on the website, you can always find the guest information there. All right. Thank you all for listening. See you at the next episode. And once again, Mbana, that's how we say thank you. Mbana and Dankeschön to Dr. Claire Murigande. And I'm your host, Raphael Harry. Thank you for the privilege of your company. That's a wrap. All right.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire. Thanks for listening to White Label American. If you enjoyed the show, please give a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. You can follow the show on all social media platforms. Visit the White Label American website for links for donations, episodes, feedback, guests, merch, and newsletter. Don't forget to download the free White Label American app on the Google Play Store and Apple coming soon. Thank you for the privilege of your company.